The settings and strategies in NHL 26 can seem confusing and overwhelming. So to help with that, I put together my personal strats to help you win more games. No messing around, let's get right into the team strategies that I would recommend in NHL 26, and we'll start first with the 2-3-4 check. Now, something that you're going to find is that in NHL 26, the defensive side of the game in your own zone specifically is extremely frustrating. And honestly, the best way to play defense is to get the puck back before you enter your own zone. That means in the offensive zone on the forecheck or in the neutral zone, and the 2-3 helps with that. So how you want to utilize the 2-3 is by using players switching and the AI that is also forechecking with you to cause turnovers or just straight up scoring chances by overwhelming your opponent. How it works is your AI will automatically attack the puck carrier. The first thing that you want to do is take the other attacking forward and cut off any passing lanes or routes out of the zone. And once you become effective at it, you can switch between the two players to really confuse and overwhelm your opponent. So in this forecheck here, you'll see my AI is attacking the puck carrier, but once he's beat, this is when your next player switch is very important. So as the breakout develops, the other player that is going to attack the puck carrier on the forecheck in the 2-3 is Solani. So the first thing that I do with Solani is take away the passing lane that is available to him. I grab the puck with Solani, I'm back in the zone, and it ends up being a good scoring chance off of a turnover that was completely created by the 2-3-4 check. Next up, we have the neutral zone. In NHL 26, I prefer using the 1-4, simply because if your opponent is able to break the puck out of their defensive zone, setting your AI to the 1-4 assists you with slowing down the rush, because they are going to have to weave through multiple players when you've got 4 defenders at your blue line. Again, like I mentioned, trying to do everything you can to stop your opponent from getting into your defensive zone is essentially paramount in NHL 26, and I've just found that the 1-4 will slow things down so that you don't give up as many odd man rushes, but more importantly, if you get effective at player switching while using the 1-4, you can stop zone entries entirely. So your entire goal when using the 1-4 is to essentially slow your opponent down and making them go east and west with short passes or just by controlling their player. This is going to help stop the 2-on-1s or breakaways and allow your players that are maybe up in the forecheck to get back and help on defense. In this situation here, as you can notice, I've basically clogged up the entire neutral zone, and when he makes his first pass, Fedorov is already pressuring him. I attempt to knock the puck free, but he gets it through to Carlson. However, I've already got a 3-on-1, essentially, on this single break-in, and anytime that you have a very big defender, it just allows you to control more area, especially when denying zone entry. So Chara absolutely demolishes him here at the blue line, and I get a turnover, and I'm out the other way. And this all started just because I slowed everything down and forced my opponent to make passes, as opposed to allowing them to just come right down the boards or through the seam in the neutral zone. Next, we have your trap or forecheck slider. This is going to determine, once you lose the puck in the offensive zone, whether your team is going to prioritize your forecheck or the neutral zone setting that you have. So in this instance here, I've got the 2-3 forecheck as well as the 1-4 neutral zone. Because I have the slider all the way set to forecheck, it is going to prioritize the 2-3, meaning that second forward is going to be very aggressive on the puck carrier. And in my opinion, I find that to be more effective, especially in the lower levels of ranked gameplay, because your opponents are not going to be as skilled at looking at different reads and multiple options on the breakout. They're more than likely going to be laser focused on one passing lane or carrying the puck out themselves. So I prefer to set it all the way to the forecheck. Now, if you find throughout the game that you are not able to ever get the puck back before they're able to get it off the boards, or maybe a reverse pass and then out of the zone, you might want to switch this mid-game. This is one that is not firm throughout my entire gameplay. Moving on to defensive pressure, and now we're getting into my least favorite part about competitive online play in NHL 26. In the defensive zone, the ability to poke check and manually defend and knock players off the puck is at its lowest effectiveness in years of playing this game. So what will happen by setting your defensive pressure to protect net is essentially all 5 of your players will play as close to the net as possible. You're effectively packing the middle of the ice in the defensive zone to assist you in not allowing players to enter the middle of the ice or get a straight line right towards your net. And again, the reason why this is so effective is because in NHL 26, trying to poke check or bump players off the puck is just not nearly as effective as it has been in years past. I've said this many times while playing the game, that offensively, NHL 26 might be one of my favorite games. Defensively, it's probably my least favorite over the last couple of years. Now, when it comes to your defensive strategy, you've got 3 options like we have for the last 2 decades. And unlike last year in NHL 25, when I believe tight point was really the best way to play against a majority of the player base, simply because of the D-to-D threat in NHL 25. In NHL 26, it's collapsing. Again, you are just trying to make sure that you have as much in front of your goaltender to try and either block or run into your opponent's player to knock the puck free due to the lack of manual options we have with defensive mechanics. Now, just because you are running collapsing, that does not mean that you should not manually pressure your opponent. But in NHL 26, the best way to do this is to simply stay within the circles. And again, you're simply just forcing them to the outside as opposed to running right at them and having them make a move. So much like on the forecheck, you want to be using your AI not to be the ones to actually get the puck back, but you want to use them to effectively guide your opponent into your user-controlled player. So in this situation here, as you can see, the puck is coming back up the boards. I've manually selected Teravainen, and I have the passing lane covered by my AI. If he were to go back down low, there isn't really much open here. So with Teravainen, instead of actively trying to run at my opponent, I'm going to take away the only 2 lanes that he has to create a scoring chance, and that is by going back to the point. So I read that he's got 1 of 2 passes, and I essentially just put Teravainen in the way to intercept the pass and get out of the zone. Setting up as many 2-on-1s as you can is really the entirety of how you want to play defense in every single situation in which you don't have the puck. So if you ever get lost in the defensive zone, think of it like this. The player that you are controlling, does it create or keep a 2-on-1 intact? Or does it open something up for your opponent where it is a 1-on-1 situation, because that lessens the odds that you're going to be able to get the puck back? So I want to go over some more examples of what happens when you don't set up 2-on-1s when you are manually defending, and you put yourself in a situation where you are 1-on-1 with your opponent, and everything that can happen afterwards because of that. So in this situation here, I'm 2-on-2 with my opponent, and because of a bad line change, my forwards are way up in the play. When you get into a situation where you are backing yourself into your zone, anytime that you start defending a rush, you really want to select a forward and bring them straight back into the zone to help, because in NHL 26, your players love to go for a change or just screw off at the most important times, especially when defending the rush. So because I try to ignore that and I keep trying to defend with my defenseman here, notice how if I'm 1-on-1 with the winger trying to cut into the middle, he's got a couple options. He can go down low and get a path right to my goaltender. He can pass it to the streaking winger to get an open shot at the net. And this just further hammers home why poke checking is so brutal in this game, as a manual poke check here does absolutely nothing, and he gets a great shot on goal. The other thing that is very common for players to do, especially on defense, is to not realize where they're taking the controlled player and how that impacts the AI. So for example, if you are controlling the left defenseman on your team and you bring him to the spot where your right defenseman normally plays, the AI will read that and it will then realize, oh, there's someone here, I'm gonna go cover. However, that happens with the processing power of something running on a PlayStation 1. So if you are not going to switch players, just realize there will be a slight delay and something will open up in the spot that you are supposed to be. And I will demonstrate it here on this play while defending the rush. Almost the exact same situation. I'm defending a 2-on-2, but notice how I am trying to keep a 2-on-1 situation. But as the play continues, I take Zubov and go straight back to my goaltender, but then over to the left, which then forces Heiskanen to move to the right. And while he is doing that in some weird animation, my opponent gets a great shot on goal, all because I didn't just stay in the position where I was supposed to be with Zubov. Here is an example of doing it correctly and knowing where the player you have selected is supposed to be. I'm defending the rush again, and I've got Zubov. Now, technically, he is the player that is closest to the puck carrier in a one-on-one situation, but I can also notice that he has a streaking winger coming down the right side of the ice, and that is Zubov's man. So, instead of chasing with Zubov, which would then have allowed my opponent to get a pass down to this winger wide open to my goaltender, I play Zubov's position, and I'm able to get in front of the pass and intercept it and get it out of harm's way before any damage can be done. All right, on to the offensive strategies, and the first up is offensive pressure. I have mine set to full out attack, but this can change throughout the game. What this will dictate is essentially if your defenseman will break up the ice with you while you are going through the neutral zone into the offensive zone. They are thinking all about offense and none about defense. And like I said, this is going to change throughout the game depending on how good your opponent is at defending the rush. If you notice that you're having a hard time getting through the neutral zone, or maybe you've turned the puck over in the neutral zone, and because your defensemen have been so up in the play, you've given up a breakaway or a 2-on-1, you can dial this back all the way down to defend lead if you want. I have not found the gap in between defend lead and full out attack to be all that big, so going down 1 or 2 has really not shown me over the years anything to be substantial when it comes to this. It's usually just defend lead or full out attack that I notice something. So again, with defend lead, your defenseman will essentially stay back while your forwards break the puck up to the neutral zone and into the offensive zone. This is obviously the safe way to go. I always start out with a full-out attack to try and score and create some offense that way. Your controlled breakout. This is not going to be something that you are going to utilize very often. To set up the controlled breakout, you are going to start behind your own net, and you will wait for your AI to kind of get into position and start a controlled breakout. I like the strong side slant because what it allows you to do is break up one side of the ice, the strong side, and it will give you a 2-on-1 of your own players, and you can decide if you want to go straight up the boards or if you want to cut to the player that is going through the middle of the ice or hold on to yourself. Again, I like the strong side slant. The last one is the quick breakout. There's 3 options like there always is. I use close support if you are playing against someone that is very aggressive. If they are very aggressive, it means that you need someone to pass the puck to immediately. It effectively will give you someone in front of your net in the slot that you can pass the puck to, instead of leaving it wide open in a gap where an AI can get into the passing lane and intercept it. The other ones, in terms of stay wide and leave zone early, both have their uses. Leave zone early will allow you to slap past the puck up through the neutral zone and maybe catch your opponent off guard, where your far side winger will just fly the zone and be up into the play, even if you're behind your goal line. So again, this is going to be dictated on how your opponent is attacking you. If they are very aggressive, use close support. If they are passive, look to try and catch them off guard with leave zone early. All right, now let's move on to offensive strategies and what I'd recommend in NHL 26. And we'll start first with the most important, and that is the offensive strategy. Now, I make this joke every year, but we are literally on year 28 of the same 3 offensive strategies of behind the net, overload, and crash the net. I feel like this is never discussed enough, but it is absurd to me. Nonetheless, in NHL 26, I would recommend the behind the net strategy, and that is to simply try and pull players out of the middle of the ice, because like I mentioned throughout this video, how you play defense online is really just packing the middle of the ice, and you're looking to get someone to come out of the middle of the ice to give you a little bit of a lane. Now, there are a number of ways to utilize the behind the net strategy. They really are very similar to prior games, but it operates like this. Your 3 forwards essentially work in almost like a triangle, and all you're doing is rotating between the 3 of them. And this circle could go all the way past the faceoff dots. It could go right through the crease, but it is essentially just rotating in a circle, again, trying to get a player to come out of position. Now, there are a number of set plays that you can run with behind the net that I'm going to go over, but let's start first with the most basic. So in this first option, it's going to highlight how to reverse. You don't just need to keep going in the same direction when running behind the net. One of the most common ways to set this up is to simply curl towards the boards that are closest to you and then send it back towards the player that is behind the net. And you can really just go and do those 2 passes over and over again until that backside player gets open. But in this situation right here, Paul Coffey is up in the play behind the net, and after I curl back back towards the face-off dots, he's wide open down low, which, as you can see now, I have a very small window with a 2-on-1 in front of the net. So once I collect it with Paul Coffey, come out towards the front of the net, a couple options. Again, I can just shoot myself and try and score with Coffey, but I also have Eric Lindros on the far side, and his defender is not really facing the play, so it's an easy tap-in goal. These are the most common behind-the-net goals that you are looking for. Now, again, they are not always going to be open because you will end up playing players that will just stick a forward and not move him inside the crease, which eliminates a lot of this cross-ice pass play when using behind the net. But I'm going to show you some other plays that you can utilize when you run into players that are just not moving at all. Now, these two are extremely effective, especially against players that are just sitting in the middle of the ice, because they are going to originate from your defenseman. So the first is to simply use your defenseman and wait for your opponent to challenge one-on-one and dictate where you are going to go. It is going to require them to move first, and 9 times out of 10, they are always going to make their move before you do, and it is going to allow you a lane right to the net by holding onto the puck with your defenseman. So in this play here, I've cycled down low behind the net, but there really wasn't anything open, so I take it back to the point with Coffey. He challenges me with Rantanen. Obviously, he is going towards the board side. I cut towards the middle. Once I do that, he then challenges me with Bedard. I hold the puck to the outside, and it's a straight shot right to the net because of 2 plays where he tried to do a one-on-one move with my defenseman and took his defenders just completely out of the way. If you watch back a lot of your gameplay, you are going to notice that this happens a lot, especially if you were in the lower ranks. And a lot of the player base has a hard time with holding onto the puck with one player. You're always looking for the next pass or shot to immediately happen. Sometimes the best way to create offense is to just hold on and be patient with the player that has the puck. This next play is one of my favorite to pull off in NHL 26. So, because you are running behind the net, your wingers will kick out to either of the face-off dots, and your centerman will stay essentially right in front of the net. So once you are at the point and you've received any pressure towards your defenseman, pay attention to that centerman that is right in front of the net, because if he has body positioning, whether he's in front of the defender or your opponent has literally just pulled that player out of position, all you've got to do is pass it down in front of the net to that player, and either on the forehand or backhand, it's an almost automatic goal in NHL 26. It is one of my favorite, and it really hammers people that are being overly aggressive with your defenseman. So those are some set plays you should look to run when you are set up in the offensive zone with behind the net. It should be a rotation, and I think what separates the average players from the good or great players is simply your ability to be patient and continue cycling without the sense of needing to move the puck for the sake of moving the puck. That is one of the skill gaps in NHL. The more comfortable you get just holding onto the puck and not needing to actually send it across for a shot or a forced pass because there's nothing open currently, the best players can legitimately just hold on to it forever, which is obviously why it's also frustrating playing very top-end players. That being said, let's touch on the other sliders that I have set up for NHL 26. When it comes to the carry and dump slider, I still have it set up to all the way to the dump side of this slider. The sad part about NHL 26 is, in NHL 25, it was one of the first years you could actually dump the puck in, and there was like a speed nerf to the defenseman where you could always get to the puck first if your winger was flying up in through the neutral zone on the far side. This year, it really doesn't have that same effect. However, your far side winger or even a trailer that's in the middle, like your centerman, for example, will carry their speed through the neutral zone a little bit when you've got it all the way set to dump. So that's what I look to use. It just keeps everyone moving up in the play. When it comes to cycle and shoot, I have it all the way set to cycle. And again, the reason for that is because you are simply just trying to get your players to move and your opponent to move a player out of position, or hopefully just move at all, given the state of defensive play in this game. And this will force your players to just constantly be in rotation. It really helps with behind the net. When it comes to efficiency and energy, this one's brutal. In NHL 26, the energy issue that started happening around NHL 24 is in far more effect. There has never been a game in which you really need to use all 4 lines simply because you run out of energy so fast. So much so that I think this game actually is hindered by this complete drastic lack of energy. what I have found to be effective without taking away from your players actually skating is to set it at 3 to the efficiency side. I found if I set it all the way to 10, my players just always lose energy after half a rush. And setting it all the way to 0, I found my players to feel sluggish when it comes to my AI when they're joining the rush. So I have it set to 3. This is just what I have noticed to be effective. And then lastly, don't block and block. In NHL 26, you really want to get your players to get in front of shots that are taken from the point. And this will have your AI actually go down into a crouch block or get in the way. This slider really doesn't feel like it does much, but I've got it set to block. When it comes to the other lines, I am legitimately the exact same across the board. I think when it comes to NHL, it's always more beneficial when it comes to online play to know what you are getting regardless of the line that you have out. The other big issue is if you have multiple settings for different lines, if you get a partial line change, let's say your winger comes off, but your center and your right winger stay on, your new winger that comes on will override, and you might not know how your line is actually set up because it decided to utilize the one player from that other line where you've got different settings. So for this, I set it to everything the exact same. If you want to change your fourth line to something else, go ahead. But in my opinion, I set it to everything the exact same. And then we've got the defensive strategies, where it is just the same 2 set of sliders that you can adjust for your D pairings. Number 1 is hold the line or pinch. Again, I think for a lot of players, it is going to be a lot of end-to-end, and you want to make sure that you have as many defensemen back as possible, so you don't want them to pinch up in the play, especially if you're not really effective at noticing that and then covering for the AI pinching in. So I've got it set to 1 to the hold the line side. The reason for that is sometimes if it's set all the way to 0, I've noticed where defensemen will literally just stand still. They won't even back skate when your opponent gets the puck. So I set it to 1. On the cycle shoot slider, D2Ds are not nearly as effective as they were in 25. I think they were far too overpowered, but they are still one of the best ways to score. They're just far more toned down. You want your defenseman to be in a spot to always hit the one-timer. So I have this set all the way to 10. The other reason why I have it all the way set to shoot is because if you have it set to cycle and you include your defenseman in that cycling up in the zone, it can really burn through their endurance and their stamina. So if you don't really cycle with your defenseman in the sense of going all the way around the zone, even if you cough the puck up, your forwards might be gassed, but your defenseman should still be in a good spot when it comes to stamina. And the same thing as my forward lines, I have these all set to essentially the exact same for all of my pairings. All right, and lastly, let's talk about defense. I mentioned this earlier in the video. Defense and the state that it is in is one of my least favorite over the last 5 years. So essentially what I would recommend to a majority of the player base, the collapsing protect meta is in full effect. You are going to get people that just pack that right in front of the goaltender high danger area, but I would not recommend just taking a player and sitting him there. What I would recommend is to pick a player and play that position a little bit more aggressive than what your Protect Net collapsing AI would do. So in this clip here, I'm controlling Will Smith, one of my wingers, and a winger's job in the defensive zone is essentially the 2 defensemen at the top. Now, with everyone collapsing and essentially below the face-off dots, what I do with Will Smith is I try and take away the passing lane for the D2D one-timer, and as you can see, he has a lane to the net, but because I have collapsing protect net on, everyone is just clogging that slot area, and it just ends up getting blocked and not able to get through. This is going to be very common and sort of what you have to do against top-end players because they know exactly what they're looking for, and all it is specific plays that they're trying to recreate over and over again, and not chasing is really the most effective, especially when you can't poke check or hit effectively like you could in prior years. Now, there is a lot more to discuss and a lot more advanced tactics that I want to cover, but for the sake of helping as many players as I could, regardless of your skill level, I wanted to stick to the basics of what I do with all of my strategies. So let me know in the comments section specific things that you want to know, and I'll be sure to do more in-depth videos that break down those specific moments and mechanics in the game. Thank you guys again for watching. I'll see you guys next time.